After a while, the mourning neighbors said goodbye to Denise and Furman. The house was quiet again, leaving only the two of them with the body of their father. Mr. Darto was planned to be buried the next day, considering it was already too late at night. From the donation money, Dennis planned to use it for tomorrow's funeral expenses. The night was getting late, and Dennis closed the door, because there are no more servants who will come. Meanwhile, Mr. Mistor, Darto's family in Lampung had not yet arrived, considering that Mr. Darto's death occurred in the afternoon. "All right, Dek, don't keep crying. Let's pray for your father so he can go to heaven," said Dennis, calming his younger brother. Pak Darto is a traveling tofu seller. He has two sons, named Dennis, 20, and Firmum, 17. Dennis was forced to drop out of school due to financial constraints and help his father sell round tofu, while his younger brother is still in school. Due to a heart attack, Dennis and Firman had to lose their father forever, even though the previous day Mr. Darto still looked healthy. Mr. Darto himself had divorced his wife about 10 years ago for economic reasons. In front of their father's body, Denise and Firman could only cry because since childhood, their father had never taught them the Quran. That night, only a handful of people paid their respects to Mr. Darto, the itinerant tofu maker. His body was laid out in the living room with a batik cloth covering it. His head was tied with a shroud so that his mouth would not open. The rain was getting heavier outside. Dennis remembered something, that his father liked to carry an amulet when selling round tofu. The amulet was kept in a teak cabinet in his father's room. Dennis immediately took the amulet and showed it to Firman. "Firman, don't be afraid. Maybe you were in suspended animation, then you died again," said Dennis, calming his younger brother. Dennis planned to burn his father's amulet for fear that his father's spirit would not be at peace. Dennis carried the amulet in the form of a shroud rope, which contained 200 coins from the past. He burned the amulet in the kitchen, while he threw the coins into his backyard. Because Dennis thought his father's merchandise sold well because of the taste, not from the amulet. In the morning, Mr. Darto's body was buried, and his family from Lampung came to join the funeral. Dennis and Firman were invited to move to Lampung by their father's family, but they refused, saying they wanted to stay in the house their father inherited. Since his father's death, Dennis and Firman have only lived together. As the days passed, their house became very quiet since his father's departure. Despite their sadness, Dennis and Firman still have to rack their brains to make money to fulfill their needs. Dennis decided to continue his father's business. Selling round tofu, Firman helped his brother after school until 10 p.m. With a cart they sold, the car body was fitted with a tarpaulin so that they were protected from the heat and rain. On the head of the car was a small speaker that played a recording of his father's voice. The round tofu is fried impromptu. The voice will continue to be repeated so that people know that there is a round tofu seller passing by. Dennis drives and Firman fries the tofu in the back seat by himself. They used to start selling after Azar, with his father's recorded voice playing on the speakers. Promoting his round tofu, from one village to another they sold. Because they had not run out, they decided to sell to a village that they had never passed. Around 9 p.m., just a little more merchandise. Then suddenly Dennis looked back. "Dek, continue. Just finish the stock today," Dennis exclaimed. "Whatever, sis. Just follow me, ma," Firman replied. The car continued to move, with Firman starting to fry his round tofu again. The speakers were turned back on, and the voice of his late father could be heard again. The road they passed this time was quieter, with trees on either side. Bang by bang, suddenly a child's voice stopped their car. The word saw a small child running towards them. With astonishment, they both saw the little boy, because so far there was no village, let alone a child in the middle of the forest. Dressed all in white and carrying a doll, the little boy approached them. Bang! "Want to know the round 5,000? Yes," said the little boy. Furman also gave the round. Then the little boy told Furman that there was a wedding party in front of there, and instead told Furman to just turn around. Furman also told Dennis that there was a celebration in front of there. "You never pray, will you go to heaven?" Furman replied. "You've heard God is merciful," said Dennis. "Do you know? You once begged God for forgiveness." Furman cried as he said "My-s." It rained that night, and they fell asleep next to their father's body. In the middle of the night, Furman woke up and saw that his father's legs were bent, straightening his father's legs again. And after that, Furman went back to sleep. But Furman couldn't close his eyes, because he felt like someone was watching them. An hour passed, and Furman woke up again in confusion, because he saw his father's body standing in front of the door, completely naked. Frantically, Furman woke his brother. They faintly heard his father say, "Amulet," then the father lay back down. But Dennis was determined to find help in the dead village. After 30 minutes of walking, they found a house with a torch. They knocked on the door, and a man in his 40s came out. Dennis explained their situation to the man, and intended to ask permission to stay overnight at his house. The man only asked Dennis and Furman where they came from and how they got to the village. The man introduced himself as Mang Jamal. He explained that he was the only resident left in the village. Mang Jamal invited them in, while drinks were prepared for Dennis and Furman. But Mang Jamal did not tell them who he lived with, where the other family members were. According to Dennis, Mang Jamal doesn't talk much, so the two of them do most of the talking. The night was getting late. Mang Jamal invited Dennis and Ferhat to sleep in the guest room. It looked neat with a mattress that was so soft. Due to exhaustion, they both fell asleep very soundly. The next morning, Furman woke up first, but he was shocked to see that the surroundings were much different from what they had seen last night. Just an empty house, full of scattered dry leaves and a hole in the roof. Denise woke up Furman out of fear, then went to the back to look for Mang Jamal, but the house was apparently empty. There was only a tombstone at the back of the house, in the name of Jamal bin Komad, intended to invite his brother to go home. But Denise refused. Denise continued his journey. Instead of a wedding party, he encountered a cemetery on either side of the road. Furman, who was sitting at the back, began to feel scared, especially when he saw many people in the cemetery who looked at him horribly. After a while, it turned out that there really was a wedding party in front of there. The volume of the speakers was turned up, lights were seen in front, and faintly heard dangdut music typical of celebrations. Many people were partying while enjoying the dangdut music. They drove their car and turned up the volume of the speakers. One by one, the people there bought their tofu, until all the trade was gone. On their way home, Denise and Furman saw someone who looked like their father in the crowd. They approached the man who looked like his father. After being approached, it turned out that it was indeed his father. But when he patted his back, the man shouted, "Go back." Denise and Furman immediately rushed away in fear as they looked back. All the crowds had disappeared, replaced by the quiet of the wilderness. Passing through the damaged and deserted roads, they did not find any passing vehicles. In the midst of fear, suddenly the speaker turned itself on. But instead of his father's voice, it played a sound like someone being tortured in pain. Frightened, Dennis turned off the speaker, but still couldn't. In fact, the speaker even sounded like a cry for help. They were both getting scared and panicked, so Dennis threw the speaker away. But strangely, there was still a cry for help. Even though they were driving fast, they didn't see any residential areas. There were only big trees on the side of the road. In the midst of fear, their car tires punctured. The two of them were confused about what to do in the middle of the forest. Just the two of them. Furman shone a flashlight around them. Dennis invited Furman to go into the forest, aiming to find a local house, but Furman refused because he was scared. They left the car and started walking in search of help. Not long after, they found a signboard of a village and a path. Dennis walked in front with Furman behind, but they couldn't find a single house with lights on. This village was more like a dead village. There was no sign of life there either. Furman insisted that his brother go back. Dennis and Furman were invited to move to Lampung by their father's family, but they refused, saying they wanted to stay in the house their father inherited. Since his father's death, Dennis and Furman have only lived together. As the days passed, their house became very quiet since his father's departure. Despite their sadness, Dennis and Furman still have to rack their brains to make money to fulfill their needs. Dennis decided to continue his father's business. Selling round tofu, Furman helped his brother after school until 10 p.m. With a cart they sold, the car body was fitted with a tarpaulin so that they were protected from the heat and rain. On the head of the car was a small speaker that played a recording of his father's voice. The round tofu is fried impromptu. The voice will continue to be repeated so that people know that there is a round tofu seller passing by. Dennis drives and Furman fries the tofu in the back seat by himself. They used to start selling after Azar, with his father's recorded voice playing on the speakers. Promoting his round tofu, from one village to another they sold. Because they had not run out, they decided to sell to a village that they had never passed. Around 9 p.m., just a little more merchandise. Then suddenly Dennis looked back. "Deck continue. Just finish the stock today," Dennis exclaimed. "Whatever, sis. Just follow me, ma," Furman replied. The car continued to move with Furman starting to fry his round tofu again. The speakers were turned back on, and the voice of his late father could be heard again. The road they passed this time was quieter with trees on either side. Bang by bang, suddenly a child's voice stopped their car. The word saw a small child running towards them. With astonishment, they both saw the little boy, because so far there was no village, let alone a child in the middle of the forest. Dressed all in white and carrying a doll, the little boy approached them. "Bang, want to know the round 5,000 yes," said the little boy. Furman also gave the round. Then the little boy told Furman that there was a wedding party in front of there, and instead told Furman to just turn around. Furman also told Dennis that there was a celebration in front of there. This incident happened in the year 2000. At that time, I was told to accompany my aunt in the teacher's housing of an elementary school in a village, let's call it Tegel in East Bali. When my uncle, who was a teacher at the elementary school, was asked to represent the training in Lombok. As a result, my aunt was alone in the teacher's housing at the elementary school. The elementary school was located on the border of Tegel village, so when night fell, the atmosphere was tense and scary. Long story short, my aunt looked for me at home and told me to accompany her there, and I was told to come in the afternoon at 6. Because at that time the atmosphere in the elementary school housing was quite terrible, especially since my aunt lived alone. The housing was not a building for the teacher's quarters, but the principal's quarters, and he lived there with his wife. My uncle and aunt had no children at that time. At 6 p.m., I set off for the housing estate. The streets were already dark, with only a few light bulbs illuminating the streets. Arriving at the housing estate, I immediately knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Bick, bick, this is Gede. Please open the door. Because my aunt was still bathing, so I was told to wait for a while at the door. I accidentally turned to the alley next to the Class V room, and I immediately got goosebumps because there was a long-haired figure who turned his back to me. I also froze because my mind was already saying, "Don't be a kuntilanak." But I adjust my breath so that I'm not afraid anymore. While I'm busy staring, suddenly I'm startled by the sound of the door opening. Brack? Yes, it's my aunt opening the door. Whoa, why are you sweating cold? Bick, I saw a hairy figure there. I pointed to the alley. My aunt replied, Ah, that's just your hallucination, de. Come in. I came in and immediately sat in front of the television watching the ball. My aunt went to the kitchen to make me coffee. Here's the coffee, my aunt said. We were watching together until it was 11:30. My aunt kept yawning, but the ball match, at that time the derby match between AC Milan versus Inter Milan, I was really waiting for the match, until my aunt said, "Deh, you dare to watch in your own living room." I answered, "Oh, der Beek," while scratching my head, because actually I still imagined the figure of the long-haired woman earlier. My aunt answered again, "All right, if you want more coffee, just make it yourself. Auntie, sleep first. If you sleep in the living room, take the blanket in the corner, but you should sleep in the room. But remember to close the door. Don't close the door halfway. If you want to open it all the way." So my aunt said. I replied, "Yes, Beek." The soccer match was going on. My fear disappeared because of the excitement of the soccer match, until the goal. Inter Milan broke into AC Milan's goal first. I was prancing myself. After the first man finished, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. My eyes accidentally turned to the window. I don't know what flashed, black color. At that moment, I started to feel scared. I quickly made coffee and returned to the living room. My mood began to be frightened, until my fear was confirmed by the appearance of a hand on the window glass. The hand was white with long fingernails. I couldn't scream. I tried to calm down, but the hand still seemed to claw, and finally a hand landed on my shoulder. "D, why are you?" Surprised beyond belief, cold sweat dripping again. "Why did you ask my aunt?" "Just now, I saw a hand clawing at the window." "Bick. Ah, you are Halu. You should sleep. Go sleep in the corner room." When I entered the room, I saw that the curtains were made of rolled-up atlas. My room was right in the corner and right in the alley where the woman disappeared when I just arrived at the housing complex. I turned off the lights and closed the door. There was a ray of light coming in from outside the room. My chest was pounding, and finally I fell asleep. But not even 10 minutes, I woke up to the sound of the door opening. I grabbed the blanket and covered my face. I wondered why the room was so bright, and when I looked at the window, it turned out that the curtains made of atlas were rolled up by themselves, so that my window was without curtains. There was a woman whose face was covered with hair staring at me. I was terrified, sweating. I couldn't scream. Finally, after a few minutes, I was able to move my hands and take the blanket to cover my eyes. I closed my eyes and hid under the blanket while shaking with fear. After a few minutes, the woman disappeared. I also ventured to close the window with the atlas curtain. The window with the atlas curtains also closed the door tightly again. I couldn't close my eyes, especially after closing the door. There was a voice as if calling my name, like this. "Did get you out of here?" This made me even more hysterical with fear. And finally I tried to read the prayer as much as I could. And finally I fell asleep. But finally I fell asleep, the door opened again. There was a black figure with red-eye fangs standing at the door. I still couldn't move. Finally I tried to move my big toe. Finally I could open my eyes and move, and it was true. The door to my room opened again, and right at the door there was a black figure, but now his back was to me with long hair. Slowly he came out and moved away from my room. I was thinking, lest he enter my aunt's room. Out of curiosity, I peeked into the living room, and surprise, it turned out that in the living room there were many figures sitting, but there were no faces visible because the lights were off. My legs did not feel weak. When I turned around, it turned out my window curtains were open again, and a woman with a big smiley face with fangs and cackling. My eyes suddenly went dark. When I woke up, it turned out that I had been fanned by Auntie, faintly heard. D, wake up, wake up. Finally, I woke up. It was 04 a.m. The living room lights were turned on by my aunt. And finally, I was told to sleep in the living room, sleeping on the furniture, accompanied by my aunt. I was given a drink of water, and after drinking the water, I was able to close my eyes, and I woke up around 09. Because it was Sunday, so the school was quiet. My aunt called me, "D, here. The coffee is ready." I was asked by my aunt, "D, yesterday why did you faint in front of the corner room door?" I answered, I saw a creepy woman, Bick. Is that woman with long hair and red eyes? How come you know? It's because that figure disturbed you several times through the window in your room. Your uncle will be back in Bali tomorrow afternoon, so tonight you'll stay here. Yes, Bick, but can I ask my brother to come here too? Oh, of course you can if he doesn't bother. I'll look for him later, Mom. At exactly 5 o'clock in the evening, Auntie took her motorcycle and told me to go to the night market to buy snacks and iced fruit for you. Bibi will be back around 8 p.m. You should tell your brother to come early so you won't be scared anymore. Thankfully, my brother Wayan came around 6 p.m. I told my brother to take a shower first. He went to the bathroom. Not even 5 minutes. The door sounded like it was broken. I checked the back door and there was nothing. Poke around in the back. Suddenly the windshield sounded like it was breaking. I immediately ran to the front, not thinking that the windshield was broken. It turned out to be fine. I checked the front porch. There was no one. Finally, my brother finished bathing and we sat on the furniture while watching TV. Long story short, Auntie came. Finally, we ate together. After eating, we chatted before going to bed. Exactly at 11 p.m. Auntie was allowed to sleep first, she advised. If you want to sleep in the living room, you should sleep downstairs. But we heeded Auntie's advice. Finally, we turned off the living room lights. I slept on the furniture. Next to my brother was next to the window. Exactly at 0:30, I woke up. I saw my brother already positioned below, and on the table there were already 2 figures sitting as if watching me. I also covered my face with a blanket, and suddenly at that moment I heard, "D, why don't you bring a gift? Offerings like candy." I also followed my brother sleeping below. It turned out that my brother was already shivering with fear too. And I turned my head to the ceiling where the woman's figure was crawling like a spider. I was instantly unable to move with my brother. Finally, after a few minutes, the creature disappeared, and I dared to wake up Auntie. Bik Gede was told to deliver offerings at the temple. The temple was a small temple. Finally, Auntie got a complete kenang containing sweets and cigarettes. I was escorted with my brother to deliver the offerings. And miraculously, after delivering the offerings, we were not disturbed again. The next day, Auntie told me, such incidents often occur when Kajang Kliwon or Purnama is approaching. So if we forget to make offerings, they will disturb the residents of this building. Since then, every time I stay at the Guru's mess, I don't forget to deliver the offerings.